Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Eternal Top Decks video series here on EternalTitans.com. Today it's time to talk about Temporal Control, one of the probably best decks right now and the best control deck in the format. So let's dive right in and take a look at the list. Okay, so this is the deck list. This is based on CrankyPanda's list that he has been tearing up ladder for like about a month now, or a bit more even. He has been in the top 5 constantly on the back of this deck and one or two other decks last month. I have talked to him a bunch on my stream about the deck and made a couple suggestions for changes, and now we basically agree on like everything except for like 2 or 3 cards maybe that I'll cover while we go over the deck list. Yeah, I'm honestly not the biggest fan of the deck. It's kind of tedious and frustrating to play because it's really slow, the games take a long time, but yeah, there's no denying its power, and that's good news I guess for all the control lovers out here. There is a great control deck in Eternal, and it might be even one of the best, or even the best deck right now, because a lot of matchups have a really hard time beating this consistently. Alright, let's talk about the card choices. First of all, the removal suit basically is 4 Desert Marshal if you want to count them as removal, 3 Scorpion Wasp, 2 Auric Runehammer, a Sword of the Sky King, 3 Vanquish, 4 Hailstorm, 4 Marshal, and 4 Channel the Tempest. So the removal suit is pretty well picked by CrankyPanda to deal with a variety of issues. Desert Marshal helps with Teacher of Humility if you have the ready power on turn 2. It also deals with some problem cards. It helps you pop Aegis. It deals with Dawnwalker, which is basically the best way of most time decks to beat a control deck like this. And if you take that away, they don't have much hope of consistently beating you. And yeah, it's just a flexible card that also can deal with opposing relic weapons by either eating the relic weapon on attack or just popping it in at the end of turn and then attacking the relic weapon next turn and stuff like that. That's also pretty helpful. And it also happens to be pretty good against aggressive units in aggro decks, just popping an Aegis or making a unit weaker by silencing it and then trading with another unit, stuff like that. Scorpion Wasp, just necessary against the plethora of Aegis running around. I don't know, Sheltering Riders, just general stuff buffed by Sword of Unity or Stand Together, Icarius and so on. It just does a whole bunch and also helps on the yeah, relic weapon front that I just mentioned. Runehammer, another solid way to deal with Aegis, with small to medium-sized Aegis units, as well as just being a generally good 2-for-1 a lot of the time by killing something and then being able to kill something the next turn if you set it up properly. And it also is a way to deal with certain opposing relic weapons. The Sword of the Sky King is just kind of like a way to end the game. You can even buy it back with Disjunction from the market, and it also is a way to deal with just big units or Aegis units in the late game. It just, yeah, a lot of games just end by Sword of the Sky King attacking the opponent a couple times. Then we have Vanquish. You need more ways to deal with fatties, and you need proactive ways, because there are decks like Big Combre, for example, that have a lot of units that don't need to attack to be scary, like Mystic Ascendant, Marshal Ironthorn, that sort of stuff. And Vanquish just deals with them very cheap and efficiently. And there's also plenty of other units that you can kill with this, that you can also kill with Wasp, but you need more answers. And then Hailstorm, this is one of the cards that helps make up for the sluggishness of the deck. The deck is not even that good at playing this on turn 3 reliably, but on turn 4 it helps you catch back up when you fall behind, and is also pretty scary for a lot of decks that are vulnerable to it. This, for example, is very important and critical at fighting Praxis tokens. Not drawing a Hailstorm might be enough to lose to Praxis tokens. So they are very critical there, because Praxis tokens basically has to try and like get you low enough before you sweep them the first time, so they can finish you off with the rest of the gas they have and or their burn reach. And then we have Harsh Rule, of course. Since the deck plays off curve a lot with the amount of crests that it has, it's very critical to keep at least one ready power for turn 5, so you can Harsh Rule on turn 5, making up for all the lost tempo before. And it's just yeah, the backbone of any control deck like this, where you just kind of like let the opponent hit you a bunch, build up a board, and then punish them by dealing with multiple threats and resetting the board state. And then we have Channel the Tempest, which often acts as a removal while also being kind of a finisher, in the sense that killing the best unit and drawing 3 cards usually puts you ahead enough to run away with the game. So yeah, this is like more of a multi-purpose thing, just like sort of the Sky King. And then we have Aurelian Merchant. The card is a bit of a two-edged sword, in the sense that the deck has Harsh Rule, and this is usually gonna die to Harsh Rule, but it also allows you to Harsh Rule on turn 4 if you have the ready power, or allows you to Harsh Rule on turn 5 if you don't have a ready power. So it makes up for like not being able to normally Harsh Rule on turn 5 with the draw you're having, which is pretty good. And it also buys you a lot of time. A 1/4 is a great blocker against a lot of stuff. If you're on the play, this can save you from a teacher. And of course the merchant part is a big deal. It provides you with a lot of utility. It gives you 4 ways to access your Temporal Distortion without having it in the main, because that both means you only have 1 copy instead of virtually 4, and it also means you can draw it when it's really bad and doesn't help you. And here you always have it when it's good, but you can just get something else when it's not good. Parliament as another way to end the game, because sometimes sort of the Sky King isn't enough, and you just want to make a bunch of units to finish off the opponent. Scorpion Wasp as additional removal for Scorpion Wasp. Great pick against Icaria decks to make sure you got that Icaria that's coming up covered and stuff like that, and just like a fairly universal answer to most things. That's actually a card that Cranky isn't running. Cranky is running Equivocate in that slot. Not the biggest fan of Equivocate, both because it's very bad against Aegis units like Icaria, for example, and having an on-demand reliable answer to Icaria against Icaria decks is nice, and also there's a lot of other Aegis that can be problematic, and Equivocate is not actually a removal. It just kind of transforms a problematic unit into a hopefully less problematic unit, but doesn't even trade 1/1, so I'm not super happy with this. But the fact that it's 1 cheaper and that it deals with units that don't need to attack, like Seraph, Mystic Ascendant and stuff like that, can matter. So against especially big Combre, for example, Wasp can be a lot better because of sort of Unity and Stand Together, but also Equivocate can be a lot better because of units not needing to attack. So it's kind of like a tricky spot, but I feel like in most matchups, aside from being a bit more expensive, Wasp should be a bit better because it actually deals with a card and trades 1/1. But yeah, feel free to swap that or say an Equivocate if you feel like Wasp's too clunky or not doing the job for you. Then we have a Moondial. Cranky has the Force Vital Arcana here because he felt like that just did enough for him. I haven't played the deck a ton to say anything specific on this, but in the amount that I played, Moondial was quite good. There's a fair share of games where you're kind of just sitting there, you don't have much resources left, but your opponent isn't pressuring you anymore because you kind of ran them out of pressure, and then you're just kind of like in top deck mode both, and there an Arcana just drawing you two cards is not that strong. But just getting a Moondial and starting Moondialing, or getting a Moondial with your second merchant after you got a Distortion, just ends the game. Drawing 2 cards a turn just beats any deck when you're not super under pressure anymore. And in the amount of games I played, they already came up quite a bunch. Like there were a fair share of games where I just got Moondial as my first market card, because the game was kind of stable, but I wasn't pulling ahead and I just wanted to seal the deal, and Moondial did that great. But yeah, if after playing enough you feel like Moondial isn't doing as much, you can consider just moving one of the Vital Arcanas in this slot and cut the Moondial. And then we have a Disjunction, just a great multi-tool that's cheap, efficient, deals with a lot of potential relic problems, but also, which is a very important part, lets you rebuy your Sword of the Sky King or Auric Runehammer, for example, to generate additional value. So keep that in mind. And yeah, then the rest of the deck, we have like one Stronghold's Visage. This is just like kind of a nice thing to drop and generate some inevitability, because then the clock starts kind of running against the opponent. That's another card that generates some advantage for you when you're not, when the game is not super running away from you, which is nice. I wouldn't necessarily mind having like another one, for example, but it's really hard to fit, and the card is very slow and clunky and a bit situational, and when you're under pressure it's really not what you want to be seeing or spending your power on. So I like the idea of just running one so that you can draw it eventually in like the mid to late game, and it buys you time to stay alive or stabilizes you against reach and stuff like that. Then we have the card draw package for Strategize, just really nice. Lets you filter your stuff, lets you do something with your power early on, get rid of situational cards that you don't need. Has some nice synergy with Find a Way. Find a Way also has nice synergy with Merchant. I initially tried like 3 Seek and 3 Find a Way, but felt like Find a Way is just very slow and clunky, and even though the synergy with Strategize and Merchant is really good, the deck probably benefits more from having a 4 Seek power to smooth out your draws, set up these critical turns where you need to play on curve, like for example turn 2 Seek power to be sure that you can like Hailstorm turn 3 and stuff like that, or Merchant turn 3 are pretty critical. So in the end the deck has enough value generation that it's more important to make the deck smooth and efficient rather than add more value to it. I think Cranky still has like 2 Find a Way and 3 Seek power, and I think like one end of the story as like 5th Sweeper, because I don't know, he's like kind of greedy like that and didn't adopt that change, but I think there's really no point in running any less than like 4 Seek, 2 Find a Way and 25 power. That's like 31 power, that's really not a lot, and you really can't count Merchant as power. It's just like convenient acceleration sometimes. It eats a lot of opposing removal because it's otherwise dead anyway, and yeah, this is like the minimum amount of power that I feel comfortable running, and the deck sees enough cards and has enough sweeping potential that I don't feel like you need the End of the Story that much. Like, End of the Story is like mainly good against mid-range decks anyway, and the mid-range decks are already a pretty good or really good matchup depending on the kind of mid-range deck with just 4 Harsh Rule. Then we have for Wisdom of the Elders, the bread and butter of any Primal control deck. Just make sure you hit your power drops and don't run out of gas in the process. Vital Arcana kinda adds to that, while gaining you some health back or buying you some time. It's a bit clunky, but having a high density of card draw is really nice. Every time you have nothing to do, you can just further your game plan, pull ahead with some resources, and gain some extra cards, gain some extra health. And yeah, card just felt a lot better than it looks. Although 5 power is really a lot for just drawing 2 cards. But yeah, it's more about like these draw chains, just draw spell into draw spell, so that you don't kind of like stuck there with a hand of situational things that don't do anything and have to like get there 1 card at a time like your opponent, because that's not how control decks win. And yeah, then we have Channel the Tempest again as like the big advantage play that pulls you ahead with a lot of cards. And the last slot basically are 2 Unseal, a card that I was pretty skeptical about in the beginning, but after playing against Cranky a bunch, I saw how necessary it is to the deck. It also happens to double as help against Teacher, because you can Unseal the weights of humility, the disciplinary weights, which is not ideal because you're still basically like discarding a card for free, but it is a lot better than having to deal with the weight of the disciplinary weights. So it's better to have this option than no option at all. And past that, Unseal just stops a bunch of really powerful things. Like in the mirror, it stops Channel the Tempest against some fringe shadow decks that might have a Zindal's Gift in their market or main deck. Unseal can stop that, but most important, it stops counters and say stand together that try to blow out your sweepers, because that's like the biggest way that these decks have to fight you and can beat you, and a lot of the time the deck has enough removal and stuff like that to prolong the game to a point where, for example, it has 7 power. Then you can just harsh rule with Unseal backup, and then you just win the game if you can counter their stand together, and this happened a fair share. And if Cranky wouldn't have had the Unseal in his deck, these games would have been easy victories for me, and this way they ended up being losses. So that made me come around on the card. Other cards that Cranky used to have were like a main deck disjunction. While this is nice and has a lot of utility, there's a like 1 is a good number because there's usually something you want to deal with, and even if not, there's like the Runehammers and the sword that you can return. But there's simply no space, and the card is like not essential and can be really awkward. You still have Strategize and Merchant to deal with it when it doesn't do a whole lot for you, but yeah, you need to fit other stuff. And the one other difference that Cranky basically has, that he's pretty insistent on, is since he has only 3 Arcana, because he has 1 in the market, he used that other slot on the second Sword of the Sky King, because he feels like it's very important. It's he thinks that the deck wants to draw it more often against a bunch of decks in the mid to late game to deal with like big Aegis threats and or like close out the game in a timely fashion. My main problem with it is that it's very clunky, and you already have 5 8-drops, and having another 8-drop that is a blank in your hand over something cheaper that helps you get there is not something that I'm happy about. But I can see if you make the Moondial Arcana swap to just use that slot on a second sword, but I'm not convinced that the deck needs it, and if the deck doesn't need it, I think another 8-drop hurts the deck more than it helps. But yeah, keep an eye on that. And then I updated the power base basically. Cranky also has the 12 crests. It makes the deck a bit clunky at times, but it also makes the deck very consistent and helps you find the cards you need. You just gotta like manage your power drops and make sure that you have the ready power in the critical turns and plan accordingly, and don't waste your ready power to play like, I don't know, a random card draw spell and then you're stuck with your sweeper because you have depleted power for that turn and no ready power. I upped the amount of time and justice sources because his deck was pretty low on bows for like Marshal. Like the deck was not very good at marshalling early, which is very important against Teacher and just in general, also against aggro. So yeah, 3 Seed of Progress to get that, and then we just have as much sigils as we can fit and 3 Cobalt Waystone. The card has a bit of a cost, but we only have 3 seeds, so between like D7 and the power fetchers you can usually set up your seed to be ready in like the mid in the like turn 3 onward, so that's fine. And Cobalt Waystone just does so much for the deck that you kind of want to fit as many as you can. The Force doesn't have a lot of value because drawing multiples doesn't do that much. You'll usually spend the first one not doing anything anyway if you draw multiples. So yeah, Waystone's great, protects you from a bunch of disruption, protects your relic weapons, protects your Visage and your Temporal distortion and stuff like that. So yeah, just a great card, so much value and power in what amounts to a slightly worse Primal Sigil is amazing. And another way to have a ready power drop guaranteed. Yeah, that's the deck list. Deck has felt pretty good as far as control decks go. I have played it a bunch on stream for people that caught me play it. Yeah, just not a big fan. Games take forever, but no denying the power and quality of the deck. And Cranky did a great job at hammering out like the core of a functional temporal deck with this. And yeah, his success with the deck speaks for himself. Alright, before we hop into the games, I wanna quickly mention two things. First of all, I've been thinking about reducing the amount of games that I do per deck tag, simply to make the deck tags a little shorter, a little less work, and also allowing me to produce them a bit more frequently and more efficiently. So I'll put a straw poll in the comment section on YouTube, so if you're watching this on Eternal Titans, just check the the description on YouTube, or rather the comment section. I'll probably put it as a comment rather than a description, so just check both just in case. And yeah, basically I want to know what you guys think is the right number. I was thinking anywhere between 3 and 6 games, because 3 is kind of like the classic number of like a best of 3, so you get like a feel of how the deck does over 3 games. So that's kind of a nice number, and it's also a fairly low number, which reduces the effort on making these series, and still gives you potentially enough games to get an impression of how to play the deck. I also noticed that the viewer numbers go down over the course of the series. There's usually at least like 2 or 3 videos that have a distinctly lower amount of views than the rest of the series, so that also made me think about this. I could also see 4 or 5 if people think 3 is not enough, so just let me know in the comments what you think and vote on the straw poll. I'll just set up answers 3, 4, 5 and 6 to get a feel what people like, and that would possibly lead to a bit more deck tags, higher frequency of content other than stream highlight type stuff, which I think benefits all of us. And yeah, so that would be cool to get a feedback from you guys, and also maybe let me know in the comments about your reasoning and your thoughts behind it. And the other thing, of course, is if you're enjoying these kinds of deck tags and my content, please subscribe to the channel. You can find the watermark with the subscription option here, or just down below under the video. And don't forget to turn on the notification icon to not miss out on future content. And of course, check my social media to not miss out on any kinds of news and updates, be it streams, new content, announcements, anything. I'm on Twitter and on Facebook, and I stream fairly frequently on Twitch if you want to catch me live and pick my brain, or just see me play various things and try out new decks that might turn into a deck tag. Alright, as usual, see you in a moment with game number 1. Stay tuned.